We're all guilty at times of not paying attention, and there are some personality types that may appear less attentive than others. As an extroverted perceiver, my attention to detail is often at fault. Now, this is because of my extroverted desire to be involved in everything in the external world, and my perceiving flexibility around schedules and diaries, because they don't really play a huge importance in my daily life as they do to others. And I often think that I'll remember something, and if I'm in a hurry, I don't write it down. And there are even times when I thought I just knew what the time was all along, and I couldn't be bothered checking. When Jack and Cass were young, I picked my mum up to take them to a child's band called The Wiggles.
Looking out my window late the other night, she was sitting in the garden and gave me such a fright, eating all mum's roses.
They're very famous then, and they currently are now. There was so much excitement to the lead up, and we all sang songs in the car as we headed towards the venue. My mum had the tickets in her hand, and she looked at them and said to me in a very quiet voice, "You do realise these are for the concert tomorrow?" Horrified, I stopped singing Dorothy the Dinosaur, and then I racked my brains for a quick compromise. Unfortunately, bribery was my only solution, and really it's only bribery if it's corruption involved, isn't it? And as I turned the car around to head away from the theatre, I said to the kids, "Hey, guess what? The concert's not on today, but we're going to the shops to buy your favourite Wiggles toy to take with you to the concert tomorrow." There was a moment of disappointment as their faces dropped, and then suddenly it sank in. And their faces were wreathed with smiles as material glee took over, and they squealed with delight. Mission accomplished. We happily sang Wiggles songs all the way to the shops. My mum was my concert policeman from there on in. If I had plans that she was involved in, I made sure they were in her diary as well as mine. There are too many of these cases to recount from my kids' childhood, but if you're looking at inattention and lack of focus on detail, that is me. However, this isn't a clinical problem or diagnosis. This is just me. And there are many people in our world who are incorrectly diagnosed with behavioural issues or think that they have them when they're purely personality related. Sometimes it's just a matter of working on your faults, if you're allowed to call them that, and creating better habits. Knowing and understanding the personalities of yourself and your kids will help you recognise the difference. I'm Kate Mason, and welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. As a part of who we are, we all have times of inattention, sometimes hyperactivity and impulsivity when we're in our natural state or when we're stressed. But for some, attention deficit is a more serious issue. For children, it can impact their ability to socialise and learn appropriately. Each year, around 310,000 children start school for the first time in Australia. Of these, an estimated 13%, that's 40,300 children, have attention problems that will negatively impact their learning in the classroom. Attention problems can also impact relationships for both children and adults and trigger emotional outbursts at times. Sometimes intervention, either medical or psychological, might be a necessary checkpoint to ensure optimum mental health and well-being for us all. Early detection of attention issues provides opportunity for earlier intervention. This is not only critical to the immediate and long-term well-being of a child, but it also has significant effects on the community. My guest today is Dr. Mary Beth Brinson, the CEO of a company called TALi Health. Dr. Brinson has worked in international healthcare and medical device industries for many, many years, working in such areas as clinical strategy, clinical governance, quality management, and risk management. We're talking to Dr. Brinson about technological advancements in digital therapeutics that help parents recognise and manage possible attention problems in children between the ages of 4 to 8 years. Welcome, Mary Beth. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Kate. I'm excited to be here.
Now, I haven't really ever looked into digital therapeutics, and I've been researching. And what I've found out is that actually I use a whole lot of stuff that I never thought of as digital therapeutics. I mean, I've got a health app and a fitness app and an app called Calm, to reduce my stress on my phone without even thinking of these as a form of digital therapy. So can you tell me about your program, the TALi program, and why it was developed and how it's been developed?
Certainly. So when I generally explain TALi Health to people, I explain that it's actually two things. So TALi works in the area of attention training particularly. And we can talk about how foundational attention is to your cognitive development and skills in a moment. But then the second part that is TALi is how the therapy is delivered, and that's through a digital medium. So instead of attending a face-to-face session with your therapist, this is a therapy that is done at home with your parents for very young children or caregivers, and then the professional that is still supporting you, so the occupational therapist or psychologist, has access through a portal to see your progress and to see how you're tracking. So it is a tool that delivers therapy for children that have attentional issues, but it is intended to be used at home for various reasons, and that's the digital part.
Wow, that's a fantastic idea. Really, really great. So what kind of different types of attention does your program actually address?
So attention, you can look at attention as selective attention, sustained attention, and attentional control. Some people refer to a fourth type of attention, which is divided attention. And you all use all of these types of attention all the time. When we talk about selective attention, we're talking about the ability for you to select from things going on around you and focus on that one thing. And when we talk about sustained attention, we are talking about that focusing ability. Once you've decided what you would like to attend to, your ability to stay on task without being distracted. We talk about alternating or attentional control, and that is the ability to switch your focus. So when something else important happens, when you're paying attention to something, that you stop paying attention and you start paying attention to something else. And then when we talk about a divided attention, we're talking about the ability to process more than one thing at a time, sometimes referred to as multitasking. So generally speaking, those are the areas of attention that we're talking about. The TALi tools work in all of them. They're different and they need to be assessed individually.
Right. So who does that assessment individually as such? So perhaps run it through so that we can get a gist of how you start and what you might do, and also how does a parent actually initially sit there and think that they might want to use a program such as this? Does it come from a formal diagnosis from a therapist, or is it something that they can just pick up themselves and grab an idea by using the TALi Detect?
So first I'll address the first part of your question, and then I'll address how parents come to the tool. The tool is gamified. Obviously, if you're dealing with 3 to 8 year olds at home, almost all child-based therapy, no matter what it is play therapy, gamification. So these are digital games that you play on an iPad, actually. And the different games address, assess, and develop the different types of attention. So you don't actually, as a parent, have to understand what's going on in the game, and the children obviously don't. They're just playing a game with instructions. And the different types of attention, sometimes you can see that they're switching tasks in there. They want you to pay attention to this type of animal and now pay attention to this type of animal, or find this type of animal, only this type of animal, as the game changes around you. So that is how the different types of attention are worked on. Through the professional, we always go through a medical professional. So attention is foundational to many, many cognitive processes that you develop. And because it's often the first symptom that people notice of serious medical conditions, things like autism or ADHD or other intellectual disabilities, that would not be something that you'd want a parent to assess and label on their own.
No.
And neither would TALi. So we'd want to go to the professional. You can have poor attention and not have any of those other more serious disorders.
Absolutely.
You can just have poor attention, and that's something that you can work on as well. But we'd always want to work through a professional, so that if a diagnosis needs to be made on a more serious condition, that you have a professional that is monitoring that condition.
Excellent. So with that, your program can take them through. Does it work for ASD children or children with attention deficit disorder?
Indeed.
Have you kind of trialed that with those children?
Yeah, so we've had 8 separate clinical trials, 2 of them randomized control trials, looking at different aspects of the tools over hundreds of children, if you add them all up. And 2 of those studies actually looked at children with different diagnoses, if you will. So some of them had autism, some of them had Down syndrome, some of them had more of a non-specific intellectual disorder as well. And because attention can be a core symptom of all of those different types of diagnoses, we just wanted to ensure that it can work for all of them. And so we have looked at that, as well as just the more straight up and down, what you would call straight up and down attention disorder of ADHD.
Cool. So you're working with Monash University, is it, at the moment?
Well, the tool came out of Monash. So we have something in Australia called the Australian Research Council. It's like akin to the NIH in the United States. And it funds research programs through universities. And so this came from 2 researchers, Hannah Kirk and Kim Cornish, out of Monash University, through about 15 years of their research, maybe 20 years of their research, and they developed a tool that was then commercialized. So Monash is no longer involved, but it was a tool born out of Australian Research Council funding with Monash. And that spun out into a company called Novita Healthcare, which then in turn renamed itself as TALi Health.
Oh, fantastic. That's really interesting too, because, look, I've just been, doing a bit of research around the place. So TALi's actually been approved as a provider for NDIS as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So it's wonderful. I think it's just recognition that, these different types of tool are important, and that people are willing to pay for them. Certainly insurance schemes are willing to pay for them.
Yep. Yeah, that's a wonderful thing. So can you tell me some success stories that you might have that you can share with us, just about perhaps different areas of concentration and how they've improved them and outcomes for the child?
Certainly. So I can first talk about, through the professional, some of the things that the professionals say about these tools, which is important. And I can do that without breaching any kind of confidence. When I describe some of the outcomes for kiddos and their families, it's just an amalgamation so that I don't breach any kind of confidentiality there. But we work in Australia with a place called Sonic Learning, for instance, and they've been in the learning space for many years, and they offer cognitive training programs for young students. And they use TALi mostly because it provides a comprehensive experience for the professional as well as the parent and the child. So the parent and the children play the games, but what is really important is the reporting that comes out of the tool back to the professional. And the portal is something that Sonic Learning are really keen on, so that they feel part of the therapy. A lot of these kids with chronic disorders, the therapist sees them for an hour, maybe once a week, over a really long period of time. And so the idea that you can get a snapshot of several hours of therapy at home by having them do a tool at home and looking through a portal is really, really attractive. It gets a better view on sort of a more typical display of how the children behave as well. So that's one thing. Yeah. The other thing is the way that the games engage and the graphics. So I think that the professionals are getting a really good experience because they're getting reporting out of the tool, and they're able to see their children in scenarios where they wouldn't, which is at home, after school, before school, on the weekends, and things like that, things that are not usually available to them. They get a very glancing blow view of children's behavior when you come into your therapist office. And then I've got 2 examples to share with you about about 2 families. One is one that they have a child that is autistic, and what this family was working on was the ability to change attention. So oftentimes children with autistic children will overfocus. You can't get them away from the thing that they really want to focus on. And so that ability to switch attention, oftentimes when they were changing this child's attention, it was causing distress and upset, not just for the child, but in the family. And the mother reported that following use of the tool, which is, used 5 times a week for 5 weeks, by the way, you train attention much like a muscle. You got to do it repeatedly over time and increase the difficulty. They found that, they were able to switch attention for that child. And I guess the impact that people miss is that, if you think about, if you've had your own children, a single child can have a massive impact on how the whole family interacts. So if you're trying to get your family ready to go to child B's, say, football game, but child A, you cannot redirect them, and there are, emotional meltdowns, it causes disruption across the wider family. And I think that impact, isn't discussed as much. We're very focused on providing therapy to the particular child, but understanding the dynamics that go on in a wider family. And the second example would be a child that was really struggling. These are young children, they're 3 to 8, struggling their first school situation. So it's the first time often that you're asked to organize and to do something collectively for a sustained period of time. And they were having a lot of issues with this young child sitting in circle time. And schools, like everywhere, it's kind of one teacher and a large number of children. And even if they have a support staff, it's still, it's not a one-to-one like at home, mom to child ratio. And the choice was, either let the child go off on their own and do their own thing, but that means they're missing educational opportunities and they don't progress with the rest of the class. And so after completion of the series, the child was able to attend more to circle time and participate more in the group activity. So those are just a couple of examples of outcomes that you can see when you improve attention.
I was working with a parent who was worried about their kid because they didn't focus in class on the details and they were worried they were going to get low grades. And then this child was given a project, which was something he could run with, and his attitudes and grades went through the roof. He was in his element. Do you and your child need to find their point of difference so they can fly? Let me help you unravel some of the enigmas of their personality and enjoy parenting a kid that you actually understand. After all, parenting's supposed to be fun. Let's chat. thepersonalitycoach.com.au. That's very true too. My son's out there teaching at the moment, and it is very difficult for those children to integrate in the class when that type of thing happens, and even no matter how much teacher aid time you might have to help them, it's not always the same thing. So can I just go back to the person who's the therapist getting feedback? So the feedback they get 5 times a week, and it's from the computer program, and it shows them, does it indicate to them how focused the child is on different days? Is that the process that they see?
Yeah, so initially they see, which is very important, are they completing the games? I think one of the issues with doing therapy at home. And therapy has always been delivered at home, by the way. If you work with young children, you're really training the parent to do extra stuff. You're not going to change anything by having a once a week appointment. It's really the parents learning how to work on behaviors at home. And any type of child therapy, whether it's speech therapy or hearing therapy or anything, it works like that. So what a concern could be is that if I turn loose this family and I see them 6 weeks, because it's a 5-week program, and I see them 6 weeks later, I've done nothing, and they come back and I found out, 3 lessons in, they just stopped. Well, you've lost a lot of time there. You need to know that. So that feedback on are they completing is really important, because you'll want to intercede. If for some reason they're not able to complete the tools, you'd want to know that and see if you can modify that or have them back in for therapy. So that's the first thing that they get to see. They get assurance that they're actually working at home, which is really not available in any other kind of therapy. You just kind of take people's words for the work that, how much did you practice this? And then second of all, there are reports that are generated that are professional reports. So they, once the tasks are completed over time, it's not every single lesson. You have to have a few lessons to be able to start seeing what's going on here. They get those reports that then they can put into how psychologists or how occupational therapists will want to assess attention. Because they're different attention domains, they get to see, are they struggling across the board, or do they have, really great selective attention, but really poor, sustained attention, for instance, or something like that. And so those reports are written in the language that a psychologist or an occupational therapist would expect to see.
Wow. That's fantastic. That's really good to hear, because as a parent who has, had children go through various therapies, you're right. Sometimes you'd go back to the person, they say, how'd you go? And you think, oh my goodness, I didn't manage to fit it in, or time got away with me, or that, they weren't in the mood at the time. So you are checking on the parents. I can see that, it is checking on the parents, and it's building habits, I guess, too, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm a former clinician myself. So, what you want to do is support the parents. You want to not make them feel bad. There's a lot going on in families. Both parents probably work. They've probably got other kids.
Yes.
And the reason you want to know is you want to be able to go back and say, hey, how can we support you? If you're not able to complete this, what can we do? Can we break it down into other things? Or perhaps an at-home, digital therapeutic is not for you. Perhaps you do need face-to-face. And so it really, the intent there is so that you can support them to develop the right habits, and that you don't find out after 6 weeks that they just haven't been coping really well.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do people find out about this? Do they find out about it from the therapist that they're currently with? Or, if someone's listening today and they go, oh, that'd be amazing, and they are currently working with a therapist, do all therapists use this treatment, or is it just something that certain therapists use throughout Australia?
So we'd love all therapists to decide to use this. But right now, attention training goes on now.
Right.
It's just, it's not that, we've invented attention training. It's actually really well researched. And you can read the meta-analysis on all of the research that demonstrates that you can actually train attention. So that wasn't something that TALi discovered. The issue is planning out, how do you train it? What do you do as a therapist to improve it? And coming up with a set of games that are patented, which is our tool, that allows you to say, if you run these series of trainings and you run through these series of tests, your child should improve. If they don't improve, there's some other things that we need to look at, about the child and see what we can do. So attention training happens now. What we're trying to encourage therapists to do is think about a different approach. Rather than pulling games off the internet or using the tools of the child therapist trade, which are, Target and Kmart games and toys and things. This is a gamified cognitive assessment and training program that you can use, plus the fact that it can be done outside of the therapist's office. So what we want to do is all of these types of disorders. They're chronic disorders. If you've ever dealt with a child with chronic disorders, it's a long-term, and it becomes expensive. And what we're trying to offer people is an opportunity to use that home time really effectively, so that anything the therapist then needs to continue to do, and this is not in place of therapists, this is with the therapist, it enhances the therapy that they're giving. If attention is a core issue, it's a core issue in the clinic as well. So if you need a child to sit and attend while you work with them, improving that attention outside of your therapy setting will make your therapy better. How do you find it? Generally, what happens is we work with the practices. We work with the medical practices. And this becomes a tool that they prescribe for the right kid in the right family. And they get it that way. We also get inquiries when parents think that they have an issue with a kid. There's a lot of Googling and Dr. Google involved. And so they can find out about TALi that way. But it is we distribute it only through the therapist. We don't distribute it directly to parents.
That is really great to know about and to hear about. And the fact that digital therapeutics have really come such a long way too in the world today. Thank you so much for enlightening me and anyone else who might be listening on this program.
COVID really helped that. It's hard to say a nice thing about COVID these days, but if there is a nice thing to say, it really pushed ahead digital therapeutics, because so many practitioners across the board of all types of medicine were unable to give face-to-face care. And so they really started saying, hey, these things, let's really look at them. And that's pushed the whole kind of industry forward, because clinicians do, particularly in an area where the therapy is not standard of care. So I would say that in ADHD and in autism, there's a lot of art to therapeutics and how you decide what to do for a child. So COVID did put digital therapeutics in the hands of people that had been reluctant. And then they were like, oh, it's not so bad. Yeah, I can do this. I can use this. I can see how it can work. And so it's been a big help, because I do think for families, there are very few alternatives with these kids. It's face-to-face therapy or nothing, honestly. And there aren't a lot of options there. And so options for families are really important when they're dealing with chronic disorders with their children.
No, you're right. COVID brought about many changes, and there are definitely some positives. There are really some positives in that, like you say, and really, in a way, even now we've opened up much more, there's still such pressure on our medical system anyway to get to see people. It's almost worse than before. So having these products around is definitely a bonus for that type of thing. So thank you. I really appreciate being here today, because I've really learned a lot by researching and just listening to you. And I'm hoping that the listener will have learned a lot too.
Well, thank you for having me. It's really been wonderful. It's a passion project for me. I've worked with children with long-term chronic disorders my whole life. And I can get quite passionate about, creating opportunities to make that whole journey, less burdensome, more rewarding.
If anyone would like to contact Dr. Mary Beth Brinson, you can find her details in the show notes. If you have any concerns about any health issues to do with yourself or your child, always check it out with your doctor or the appropriate healthcare provider. As previously mentioned, sometimes early intervention, either medical or psychological, might be a necessary checkpoint to make sure that everyone is healthy. New digital technological processes such as TALi that are recognised and government approved could be the pathway for the future of the initial diagnosis. I'm Kate Mason. Thank you for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review that would help others learn about this podcast. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, then you'll find my newly launched book, Who Is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies, and we'll see you next time.